with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, August 21st, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Rebecca Ruth Gould, author of Erasing Palestine, Free Speech and Palestinian Freedom. And later in the show, Jessie Kelly, member of UAW Local 160, is here to discuss the massive contract negotiations happening right now. Meanwhile, Arevalo wins in Guatemala an incredible rebuke of the conservative establishment that long held power. We'll have a guest on tomorrow to discuss that. Tropical storm Hillary hit Southern California over the weekend, and officials warn flooding could be deadly. Lahaina residents fight for water after the devastating fires, and resorts try to seize it for themselves. Biden travels to Maui today as well to meet with first responders and residents. 2/3 of Republican Iowa caucus goers say Trump did not commit any serious crimes, and he has a 20-point lead. Meanwhile, Trump still plans to skip that first debate on Wednesday. We'll be covering that on the channel. Mark Meadows reportedly told the special counsel that Trump never declassified the documents that he hoarded, undercutting Trump's main defense there. Same with Pence.
Also, Trump said that to reporters.
Yeah, and we have it on audio. Oh, it was a joke. Whatever. The White House urges everyone to get the updated COVID booster this fall. Biden announces more funding for rural broadband. The DOE begins its piecemeal student debt forgiveness, forgiving $39 billion in debt for borrowers who've been paying for over 20 years. Norfolk Southern spent millions to kill the rail safety bill, currently stalling in the House. A California woman killed over hanging a pride flag outside her clothing store. And lastly, the death toll in the Russia-Ukraine war nears 500,000, according to U.S. officials. Horrific. All this and more on today's Majority Report, or a Majority Report as it were. Hello to everybody. I'm a little sluggish. I had a big weekend, lots of drinks, lots of fun. It was my best friend's wedding. I cried the entire time. I gave a speech. It went okay, and it was perfect weather, so perfect weekend. But that's that kind of thing. It takes some energy out of you a little bit.
Yeah, that's all right. I think you earned that, and we're covering for Sam this entire time anyway.
That's true. That's true.
We need to enjoy ourselves on the weekend,
and then we have the debate coverage as well. So lots of content for everybody, or content.
So let us
creators.
have our weekends.
Yeah, exactly. Matt, Bradley, hello. We are with you for the rest of the week while Sam is on vacation. Although he may be joining us for the debate coverage. We shall see if he's able to do so. Either way, Wednesday night, check us out. We'll be having some fun with that, even though Trump won't be there, which is a bit of a
I really
bummer.
hope he does get a seat in the crowd and just watches with his arms folded.
That was a rumor, right?
I think so, yeah. But I think that might be one of those wishful rumors that people in this business say because it would mean a lot more eyeballs.
That was Emma. That was your version of going, we'll have some fun. I'll see you out the trail.
I'll see you out the trail. But I feel like, why does Ronna McDaniel really wants him to participate. I don't really know why, though, because I would imagine the entire Republican establishment does not want him to be the nominee.
She has a little, like, I still think she has some allegiance towards him. Also the ratings, I feel like.
The ratings, I guess. I guess this is the ratings party, and then it would make sense for Trump to be the nominee. But let's talk really briefly about just some of the reaction to what we're seeing in response to the wildfires in Maui and the massive flooding in Southern California as a result of the tropical storm Hillary. The right really just has tried to downplay climate change in a variety of different ways as the years have gone on. First, it was denial. Then it was denial that it was man-made. And now it's denial that it's a big deal. And Brian Kilmeade's reaction to Jake Tapper's conversation with Hawaii Senator Mazie Hirono is indicative of that general kind of just smugness in the face of the existential threat that we're dealing with here.
Experts warn that extreme disasters such as this one are only becoming more common because climate change is fueling stronger storms, hotter temperatures.
Yes, clearly, wildfires is an occurrence in Hawaii. We very, very much need to acknowledge that climate change is upon us.
Here we go. Every time something big happens with weather, it's climate change. I call it complete lunacy. Many on the left say climate change has everything to do with the fires, the hot summers. And now some states are making it mandatory. Mandatory to teach it to every classroom. Put it in the curriculum from kindergarten through high school. It's so-called settled science. Joining me now, a founder of...
Exactly.
As he brings on Michael Schellenberger to talk about
Oh, that's who that is? Oh, great. Yeah. I mean, it is settled science. ExxonMobil knew of the effects of their product, for example, since the 70s because of internal science. It was covered up because of profit.
You can find like scientific digests from like the 19 aughts where they're like, oh yeah, like one thing we need to look forward in the coming century is we're burning all this stuff and it creates a sort of blanket for the sun.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, they kind of knew it even then.
They knew it then, but they were using some unique framing for that. I mean, it's just like saying, Kilmeade, every time something gets wet, people blame water. Or like every time someone gets punched in the face, they blame the guy who punched them. I mean, come on. Are we really going to go over this again? I don't even know where the climate denial tactic goes from here. It seems like
QAnon.
Well,
space lasers.
Tim Pool talking about that,
Yeah.
right? That it's a Chinese weapon.
Okay, fine. The world is on fire, but it's not anything to do with the oil industry. It's just...
It's the Jews or the Chinese.
It's the political elites and the shadowy ethnics.
Yeah. Totally. And then once like there is migration, and there already is, but once migration due to climate change ramps up, it's going to be all about the Great Replacement stuff.
Yep.
We're seeing that in Europe already, and like someone like Tucker Carlson before he was canned for reasons that are becoming a little bit more clear based on that Ray Epps defamation suit, but he was, I would say, at the forefront at Fox of laundering that kind of more European right-wing eco-fascist fixation into a mainstream audience in the United States. Like, we're gonna, in 5 years, that's gonna be central to the right's response to climate change in the way that a lot of anchors and right-wing personalities laundered turfism from the UK. It was tested over there. It was a successful agent of hatred. And then now, turf talking points are all over Fox News and right-wing media. So the Kilmeade's dismissal here is a little bit old-fashioned, is really just my point. But it still is as pervasive as any of the other more boutique conspiracy theories as of right now that we describe.
Well, Fox News kind of demonstrated something that I've been saying, which is like this, like this is kind of validation for CRT, and DEI. I know less about. It seems like a sort of executive board level thing. But anyway, like this an article from Fox News by Nicholas Giordano, I think reveals a lot. America's schools are becoming training grounds for climate change activists. Just when you thought we had made this is how insane this is. Just when you thought we had made progress by exposing diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) and critical race theory (CRT) infused curricula throughout our education system, we now have a new distraction: the climate change agenda. Yeah, sorry, people are learning real things in school.
I love when everything's a distraction. What's it a distraction from?
Yeah.
It's a distraction from like
patriotism.
The saying the anthem and talking about how great America is. If that's the case, I'm fine with it. All right, guys, quick break. We have a word from one of our sponsors. Sam from the Beyond will be giving you this message, and then when we come back, we'll be speaking to Rebecca Ruth Gould.
Hey, folks, you want a good night's sleep? Is it hot in your apartment, like mine, where your air conditioner doesn't work? Well, we have teamed up with Cozy Earth, and they are offering you 40% off at cozyearth.com/majority. Enter majority at checkout. And now you will be able to sleep comfortably. Why? Because Cozy Earth sheets, they regulate your temperature. All you got to do, you swap out your current sheets for these soft, breathable, like I say, temperature regulating sheets from Cozy Earth. They were Oprah's favorite thing for 5 years in a row. If you do not agree that you are sleeping cooler, that you are more comfortable this summer, they will refund your purchase price plus shippings. And here's the questions they will ask you. None. You just say, I don't want these anymore. They will refund your purchase price plus shipping. And guess what? You get 100 nights to try it out. So you'll get a sense of what does it feel like in August? What does it feel like in September? What does it feel like into October? 100 nights. And how can Cozy Earth make this type of guarantee? Because their bedding is made from something called viscose. It's from bamboo. It traps less heat. And it enables you to sleep cooler and more comfortably year-round. Oh, my God. I almost feel like I'm going to fall asleep right now. I have a bunch of Cozy Earth stuff. I've got the bed sheets, I've got the pillows, and I also have the loungewear, which I don't know if I'm promoting today, but I do have the loungewear, and it's awesome. I sleep hot, folks. Not with these sheets. Cozy Earth's luxury bedding and loungewear transforms lives by offering the softest, most luxurious, and responsibly sourced products in the world. For a limited time, you can save up to 40% on Cozy Earth. Go to cozyearth.com/majority. Enter the code majority at checkout. Save up to 40% now. Try them for 100 nights. If you don't sleep cooler, send them back for a full refund. That's cozyearth.com/majority.
We are back, and we are joined now by Rebecca Ruth Gould, professor at the University of Birmingham, author of Erasing Palestine, Free Speech and Palestinian Freedom. Rebecca, thanks so much for coming on today.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
So if you could talk a bit about your story, because that is so central to the book, your background, your history up through the writing of your piece that was, I think, provocatively titled in a way that is meant to be like create conversation beyond anti-Semitism, and just how that played out for you.
Sure. So that story begins in 2011 when I was living in Bethlehem in the West Bank. I had a fellowship. I just got my PhD from Columbia University in Middle Eastern Studies, and I had a fellowship at an institution called the Van Leer Institute. That's in Jerusalem. And I took the fellowship because it was an opportunity actually for me to live in Palestine. And I did insist, that I wanted to live in the West Bank. And that turned out to be both, I think, the right decision, but also a very, from a kind of lifestyle point of view, a very difficult one, because I commuted into Jerusalem, which is not far away. It's, even a walk, potentially it's just an hour, maybe walking, but it takes 3 or 4 hours because of checkpoints. And so I sort of lived the life of working in Jerusalem, although not a couple times a week, and waiting with Palestinian workers at the checkpoints on several times a week, and then living in Bethlehem and seeing the contrast, seeing how the separation of these worlds that were literally right next to each other, also seeing the encroachment of settlements and seeing the bubbles in which especially Israelis lived, where they actually weren't allowed to go to the West Bank. And there was such, in some level, there was an awareness of what was happening. In some cases, there was no awareness, but they were so separate and yet so close. And it was a very surreal kind of experience. And after a certain point of kind of living this duplicitous existence, I guess you could say, I just wrote an article. I remember that was just after I came back from Hebron, where the settlers are really creating completely unbearable conditions for the Palestinians living there. Throwing trash on their homes, defacing their living spaces, and it was just such a tragic thing to see. And so I wrote an article, a short article, just something more like a rant, you could call it, called Beyond Anti-Semitism. And it was just a couple of pages. I published it in a Counterpunch at the time, the print version. And I was really voicing actually a lot of what certain people in Israel were saying on the left, that the Holocaust was being weaponized, and anti-Semitism was being weaponized in a way that prevented Israelis from looking at what was actually happening in Palestine. And and I even sort of referenced, there's a tradition of, I think, making this kind of argument. Judith Butler is someone, she wrote in the London Review of Books something similar, so that was kind of an inspiration. But I wouldn't say it was a particularly reflective piece. It was just, a few paragraphs of anger at myself too, because obviously I felt a bit somewhat complicit in the system of crossing through the checkpoints, seeing the different ways in which American citizens were treated. And so it was just an outburst, I suppose, of sorts. And I
catharsis, and you were radicalized by seeing the experience of Palestinians.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I was definitely radicalized. Yes. And so that, and I published it, and then very soon after I left Bethlehem, and I resigned from the fellowship, and I went on to other things in life. I work on Iran also, so I work on prison poetry in Iran, and I just sort of, that was a chapter of my life that I thought I'd left behind. And then in 2017, I ended up I'm American, but I've been living in the UK at the University of Bristol. I just started a job there. And a student who I actually never met, never spoke. He was a student in my class, but I never personally spoke to him one-on-one. So I didn't know who it was. But he describes himself as a British Israeli Zionist. And he found this article, which again was just pretty, among the various things I've written, it's, pretty, not something pretty minor. But he found it, and he decided that, in his view, it was anti-Semitic. And so he sort of timed his protest letter to coincide with Holocaust Memorial Day in the UK to really shine a light on, what was wrong with leftist academics in terms of their writing about Israel. And I was notified of these goings on at the university, but I wasn't allowed to know who it was or what was happening. And I think what was interesting is that this type of thing had not happened before in the UK. I think in the US, is particularly those who are involved in Palestinian activism will have seen how these charges of anti-Semitism are weaponized in the public sphere, especially in university context. But really, until that point, the UK was a space where there was a lot of scope for freedom of expression. And so this is, in a sense, where my personal story intersects with the forces of history, because it was not an accident that this happened to me in 2017. In the UK. Just a few months earlier, the UK government, under the Prime Minister Theresa May, was the first government in the world to adopt what is called the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And I'm sure we can talk about that more. But that's kind of a segue. And so that explains, I think, why this student, found a very opportune moment to make an issue out of my article. That after he published an op-ed in the student newspaper, the various UK government officials called for my being fired. So it became a really an issue in the public sphere, particularly the right-wing media. And the university undertook a kind of investigation of the article. And although they did fully exonerate me of anti-Semitism, I think, and this segues into, I think, of the broader conversation, what was really problematic about that whole process, which went on for several months, is that they did use this new definition of anti-Semitism, which aligns criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. They took a kind of point-by-point analysis and applied it to my article to see if to sort of to basically show that they were complying with the government, with the newly adopted definition, the definition that had been adopted by the UK. So it was really, I would say, a kind of education into how definitions of anti-Semitism can silence free speech and Palestinian activism. And I was certainly not the only person who was silenced, and there were many.
Can you explain what happened to you too? I mean, you were you, in the wake of this article, you had to leave your job, right?
Well, I chose to. I wasn't. Again, they did exonerate me, so there was no kind of firing or nothing like that. I mean, they issued a statement. I did have to get a lawyer, and I would advise anyone in this situation to get a lawyer. So I wasn't fired. In fact, interestingly, someone else was fired after me at the same university for similar, for some related comments in their teaching. But I chose to leave because it was just clear to me that it was the whole process showed me that it was a environment where Palestinian points of view, Palestinian activism was treated as a kind of risk, and I didn't want to be in that environment.
That makes sense. And I should say you were accused of anti-Semitism, but you are of Jewish descent yourself. And if I don't want to identify you, but that you have those roots. And let's talk then about the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which is so central to your critique here. Why is that definition important outside of the fact that the UK government adopted it in 2017? And then what are the elements that are harmful and insufficient?
So it really represents a kind of radically new approach to thinking about anti-Semitism, and broadly, I mean, because it is actually being extended to other minority groups, to racism in general. It's an approach that really focuses on words and language and not offending people. It's comprised of 11 examples, so it gives us very short, not very objectionable definition of anti-Semitism, that it's hatred of Jews and so forth, it's not very informative. But then the problem is the examples that are given. 7 of the examples out of 11 are related to comments about Israel. So it really, just that kind of form shows that it really it sees itself as targeting those on the left who are critical of Israel. It is sort of removed from. It de-emphasizes the other kinds of ways in which we know anti-Semitism manifests among the right wing, in really violent acts of massacres of synagogues and so forth. So, and it's a lot about attitude and rhetoric. So, for example, denying the Jewish people the right to self-determination. I mean, that's very much a matter of attitude, right? There are many reasons why one may be opposed to nationalism, right? So it makes it very broad and very, very abstract.
Well, it's also in the midst of the active denial of self-determination for Palestine, which is done through force and through blood. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's also obviously the definition that was weaponized against Jeremy Corbyn and others in the Labour Party in the UK. If you could talk about that broader political context as it fits into this definition.
Yeah, right. So that definitely had a huge impact on UK politics. As soon as Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party, he was. A lot of people made clear. A lot of people within Labour made clear that they didn't like his politics. It was too radical for them. It was not going to win a broad consensus and so on. And so it was very convenient, to draw on this definition that had been adopted by the UK. And it was another thing that's worth noting is that it was actually originally intended in its original articulation. It was created for kind of procedural purposes to help police, even though one might question how useful it was, but to help police classify hate crimes. But then it became a political instrument when it was adopted by governments. And it came to be sort of a sign of how pure you are. Are you anti-Semitic or not, and you could purify yourself of anti-Semitism by just adopting a definition. And so Corbyn was very resistant to adopting that definition, rightfully so. I mean, it is a violation in itself of free speech, and that really cost him quite a bit, including the leadership of the Labour Party. So it's what's really troubling is just the intense politicization of this concept of anti-Semitism.
In the United States, it's ubiquitous. I mean, it is a constant threat to the free speech of people who are of Palestinian descent, like Rashida Tlaib, who has family in the occupied territories, I believe, against Muslim members of Congress like Ilhan Omar as well, who chooses to be vocal about this, especially using her experience as a refugee. Even against Bernie Sanders, those accusations are leveled as well. And in the United States, it has an even more kind of malevolent manifestation as well, because AIPAC as a well-funded organization is spending a ton of money through kind of back channels to attack pro-Palestinian candidates on a variety of different things, because and it's not just AIPAC, it's also corporate interests going through AIPAC, because if you are someone speaking out about Palestinian rights, you're also probably a threat to corporate power, and you're also a leftist in that way. So it's just, I'm curious about your take about how those things intersect.
Right. Well, I think this turn in my book is really looks in depth at this definition and the way in which it's this kind of transforming it into a matter of attitudes and basically a political posture makes it very, very useful to organizations like AIPAC, like ADL, and kind of conceals the material economic basis of their support for Israel, which is about often, trading weapons, technology, and not so much about defending against anti-Semitism. So I think it's that the definition helps with making it something with kind of preventing us from seeing the actual motivations at work, which are often about promoting a certain kind of political position.
Can you talk a bit about how that definition conflates Zionism with Judaism or being Jewish, and honestly, the role that plays in muddying the waters of identifying the reality of anti-Semitism, which like there was a synagogue massacre not too long ago in this country. Like these are things that we should be clear about. And yet this has this muddying effect for colonial lens.
Sure. Well, it's, I think, one of the worst things, well, okay, two of the worst things that the definition does. First of all, it separates anti-Semitism from other kinds of racism. So it treats anti-Semitism as this kind of sui generis type of thing that doesn't relate to anti-Black racism, that doesn't relate to other kinds of prejudices. And that's just not, I think, what experience tells us. It's how it is. The way racism works is also how anti-Semitism works in many cases. And it also homogenizes the Jews in general. It puts them into one point of view, usually a point of view aligned with Israel, and it erases a very long and rich and deep history of anti-Zionism, or just kind of not even always anti-Zionism, but kind of the Jews who felt that it just wasn't relevant, this migration to Israel. I think that's, if anything, the majority of Jewish history throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. I talk about, there's one particular individual who is kind of the hero of my book, Abram Leon, really, really brilliant writer who has a very profound analysis of anti-Semitism. It's a book called The Jewish Question. I would recommend to all of your readers. And he wrote it in Nazi-occupied Belgium. And so he gives, and it's a kind of Marxist-inspired, what he calls materialist analysis that looks at the long history of discrimination against Jews, why they were forced to become a merchant class, why they were placed in, even when they were, say, in positions of power, well, they were forced into that position and they often didn't benefit from it. And it's just a kind of the opposite of what the IHRA definition does. And I think that history, it's very rich. And the position that says, well, any opposition to Israel or any opposition to Zionism is anti-Semitic doesn't acknowledge that history. It doesn't acknowledge the history of Yiddish-speaking Jews who are often anti-Zionist.
Yeah. And it's incredible how like the that definition just becomes ubiquitous, and the chilling effect that it has as well. I mean, we point to these moments of silencing, right? Of erasure. I mean, your book is called Erasing Palestine. But it's also just what isn't said because of these forces. Can you talk a bit about the role of generational trauma in your view, and not just kind of the colonial elements that I feel like we explore, but as your perspective as someone, as an academic and of Jewish descent, what your take is on the generational trauma of people who understand the horrors of the Holocaust and how that plays into the dehumanization of Palestinians.
Wow. So there's I just want to point out, generational trauma on both sides, obviously with the Nakba and among Palestinians. And I think that, there are many intersecting parallels. And also the sense in which, I am Jewish, I certainly wasn't raised to think of myself that way, but I explore that whole question in the epilogue. So in case people are wondering what exactly I consider my position or my history within Judaism to be, because just in my family history, in my father's side is of Jewish descent, but they converted to Catholicism and immediately changed their name. So Goldstein was not a name that would really allow them to prosper in American society during the 19th. Actually, this was the mid 20th century. You would think, that at that point America could kind of accept Jewish people as a legitimate part of their society, but that wasn't really the case, I think, for many, many people. And in fact, that's a really good point. The Holocaust, which is so, the discussion, the Holocaust today is the kind of the symbol of the greatest evil, and rightly so, right? The greatest evil that humanity can inflict on humanity. But actually during the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, it was not a topic that was widely researched, even in America. And so, yes, the trauma, the silencing went very deep. There was a kind of taboo around discussing the Holocaust. There was no Holocaust studies in the 40s and 50s. And it was not something that, it was encouraged to discuss in the U.S. education system. And certainly, it might be said that, the U.S. didn't do what it could have to accept the Jews who were fleeing from Nazi Germany. They turned back some of those boats, right? And so there's a lot that I think, the sort of nationalist narrative within the U.S. would want to conceal about their own complicity in these events. So I think it is true that, all of that silencing has to come out. It has to end sometime, and it's gradually, coming to the surface. But the problem is that then when these memories of the Holocaust, these efforts to kind of reclaim Holocaust memories are voiced, they're often appropriated by various political interests. Not always, by any means. There's a really wonderful book I could recommend to readers, The Holocaust and the Nakba, Columbia University Press, which weaves together memories of the Holocaust and the Nakba. So I think there's a lot more. We definitely need to create a space for these traumas, and no one, certainly including myself, wants to silence those memories. I think they need to come forth, and they are still, they're unfortunately, some of the best, most lucid witnesses to the Holocaust, the ones who survived, like Primo Levi, Bruno Bettelheim, they killed themselves because that was, how deeply unbearable their experience was. So I think in a sense that's an argument about free speech as well. But the problem is definitions like the IHRA or the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, it's not what it says in the label. They don't just promote memory of the Holocaust. They silence perspectives and points of view.
Can you, based on your experience living in the West Bank, and also, of course, your academic research, speak about the parallels between Palestinians and indigenous populations? I think the U.S. is a very good parallel for right now.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, I think one place to look is with naming practices, right? So many of these villages that have Israeli names were inhabited by Palestinians. And when I was there, this was 2011, 2012, there was still an effort. I'm talking about the places that were occupied by Palestinians in 1948. There were efforts to keep Arabic. It's gotten worse now. That's what I'm trying to build up for. Arabic was removed as one of the official languages of Israel, but there was a kind of nominal acknowledgement of the traces of a former way of existence, and those are being very radically erased, with Palestinian flag being banned and so forth in Israel. And one very kind of concrete way in which you can see the concrete parallel between U.S. settler colonialism and Israeli settler colonialism, or even just generally settler colonialism in Israel, is if you look at Jerusalem, the way in which it's divided into the Armenian quarter and different quarters of the city. Well, that's an artifact of colonialism. That's not how Arabs understood their city to be divided into these different religious groupings. And then you see in the United States, there is the way that states like Mexico and New Mexico, they have these very clean borders, right? That kind of impose a nationalist map onto peoples, Hopi peoples and other indigenous peoples of the United States that didn't necessarily have these same boundaries. So that's just one very kind of, I think the way the lines are drawn, the borders, is something that closely parallels, close parallels between settler colonialism in Israel and the United States.
Lastly, before I let you go, there has been some movement, I would say, in the United States, at least on this issue. Not nearly enough, and I worry deeply that we have flooded the zone with money and weapons that now Israel is one of the top 10 weapons exporters in the world, and they have their own self-sustaining mechanism of dehumanization and of militants. So
Sure.
I am impatient, but I am also looking for a little bit of hope today. What is your assessment of some of the progress made on this front?
Well, I think there's just in terms of demographics, the generational divide is clear. I mean, there are certainly a lot of older Jewish Americans who are activists for Palestine, but I think particularly among the young generation, lots of polls show that there is a change of heart, that Israel is increasingly coming to seem like not necessarily a country that, I'm talking about American Jews, that they would want to identify with or support. Sometimes, in some cases, these birthright trips, that American Jews are invited to go on at the full paid vacations to Israel, often they have the reverse effect, and sometimes, at least, American Jews see it's not quite everything that Israel is saying it is. And I also think in U.S. Congress, the very fact that you have Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, that wasn't the case 10 years ago. So definitely, there is a kind of core of people who are aware of what's going on and are going to challenge their politicians and question. I think that kind of the questioning of politicians and where their funding is coming from, that's becoming more visible and vocal in the United States.
Rebecca Ruth Gould, the book is called Erasing Palestine, Free Speech and Palestinian Freedom. We will put a link to that wherever you're listening to or watching this. Rebecca, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. All right, quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be speaking to Jessie Kelly of the UAW Local 160 about the negotiations happening right now. Be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by Jessie Kelly, member of and chair of communications for UAW Local 160. Jessie works at General Motors in Warren, Michigan, where there was just a rally for workers held by the UAW and the leader, Shawn Fain. Jessie, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
For sure. So I just mentioned Shawn Fain, his leadership, and how, honestly, aggressive in a great way he's been. It's been a bit of a breath of fresh air, at least from my outside perspective. But I'm curious how you feel about the leadership, the way that UAW is approaching these contract negotiations, as opposed to the past, or as opposed to what you've observed with other unions?
I mean, there's a stark difference. First, I want to apologize. I lost my voice because of the rally yesterday.
Oh,
so
good.
I'm a little hoarse, but there is a huge stark difference between how this is being handled under this new administration compared to the last. I think it is extremely refreshing. I think my membership is thrilled about it. I think it's going very well. And there's a lot to be said about constantly being informed and how much that grows the solidarity.
Right. And so for people that may not be up on this, September 14th is the deadline for an agreement. If you could just catch people up on where the UAW is in their negotiations with the big three, Ford, GM, and Stellantis.
Sure. So our contracts all expire on the same day at September 14th at 11:59 p.m. We usually go into bargaining and we pick like a target. We start with that company, and then we try to get the best agreement from them and then pattern off of that. So this time is going to be a little bit different. We've decided that we are not going to pick a target. President Sean Fain has been super honest and open about the fact that if you do not have an agreement that he's satisfied with and that the membership is going to be satisfied with on September 14th at 11:59 p.m., then the membership will go on strike, because he knows and we know that we're in a place inside of history where we deserve everything that we're asking for. We've had concessionary agreements after concessionary agreements, and it's time to end that. As he put yesterday at the rally, the race for the bottom ends on September 14th at 11:59 p.m. So we're in this fight. We're in bargaining. He's been also very open about the fact that he feels like the companies aren't taking bargaining as seriously as they should for where they're at right now. And we're just, quickly approaching the September deadline, and hopefully we all get a good contract. But if we do not, we're ready to strike if we need to.
Well, breaking news today, Stellantis, one of the big three, is threatening to move the production of the Ram 1500 to Mexico, to another country. Like, can you speak about how strategic that is from their end, as essentially a threat to get the union, which 150,000 workers are covered under these contracts that expire at midnight on September 14th. They're scared, so they're making threats in the press.
Yeah. I mean, as an American consumer, we should be disgusted that was even suggested. It was our tax dollars that have helped out all of these companies when they needed it the most. It was our sacrifices that saved them. It is just honestly despicable to read something like that. As a consumer, we want to be as ethical as possible. We want to make sure that we're spending our money in the best way possible. So I know for me, I want to work for a company that is loyal to their people, not to their profits. And I want to spend my money with a company that's loyal to their people and not loyal to their profits. So I mean, that's all I can really say is, as ethical consumers, we should be outraged. And I hope people are. And I hope that they read that today. And I hope that they voice their concerns and they voice their frustrations for even the mere suggestion of that.
Well, I mean, the so central to the branding of these companies is that they're American made. I mean, and they want that to be the public face, especially in the wake of what you described, which is the bailout money that, workers took a haircut and they were affected. And now that the industry has recovered and the electric vehicle production is coming into play, and we can talk about that if you'd like in a second, they're making threats because they don't want to pay their workers.
Right. And it's not like they don't want to pay their workers and then they're going to make cars more affordable for everybody. That's not the case at all. So I work at General Motors. We build the Silverado here in Flint, and we also build it in Mexico. And if you, as a consumer, go to the lot right now and you buy a Silverado, those are the same exact prices. I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about.
100%. I mean, let's talk about the electric vehicle production, right? And your observations about the electrification of the industry. How has that changed the relationship between the workforce and management, and how much does that play into what we're seeing in terms of these negotiations?
Well, I think we're seeing it a lot. I think that they're using it as a scapegoat to try to put more fear again inside of bargaining, to say that they can't afford what we're worth. And they're using the EV transition as a means of justifying that they're claiming broke. So that's where we're at with that. But we have a lot to win as a union as far as the transition goes, because we're going to be greatly impacted on just job losses first. You lose 40% of the components transitioning from an internal combustion engine to an EV, which means that we need less people to do the work because those components cease to exist. So we need to make sure that the people's jobs that are going to be impacted by this transition are safe. And we have to make sure that they are retrained and then put into jobs of equal or higher paying value than the ones that they left. What we've seen so far, which was my biggest fear about this transition, is that they've taken the jobs that are being created by EV and they're putting them in LLCs, or they're third-partying them out, or they're creating multi-tier agreements. And these workers are making $15, $16 an hour when we should be taking our workers whose jobs are going to be impacted and putting them into those jobs, like I said, for equal or higher paying wages. Is
that the joint venture that I read about, right?
Yeah.
Their efforts to get around the union and those contract talks by getting EV technology, like really learning it from overseas companies and not and trying to circumvent UAW contracts, if I'm not mistaken.
That's exactly it.
Okay. And
they get creative all the time. They get creative with their tiers, with their reclassifications, with their LLCs, with the companies that, they create. We've seen it with Lordstown where, they just like built another site behind the one that they sold out. It's just, they get creative in ways to undercut us. And that's exactly what's happening in the transition into EV. So we are aware of that. We need to fight for that. And it's a big, big fight for us. So as far as the relationship between us and management, has it affected it? I don't know. I don't know really the answer to that. I think management is just as fearful about the transition into EV.
Right. I mean, but what they learned from Tesla, for example, is that, hey, we don't need to make these cars with union labor. We don't need to do that. And it seems like they're taking a page out of that book as a way to come after you guys in negotiations and
but that kind of, sorry to butt in, but that should be a selling point, like over Tesla is actually these ones are made by union labor.
Right. That would be a selling point for me, and I think for a lot of consumers, right, if they were really focused on that. But I mean, what's your sense? Is they're more worried about the precedent or giving you guys a foot in the door to make some more money? Because what I'm reading is that GM saw record earnings in 2021 and 2022. So there's definitely money on the table.
Yeah, a ton of it. So much. And when I say management, I just mean the management out on the floor, not like the higher up executives that, obviously get them reap the most benefits from the exploitation of the workers. But the management out on the floor is worried too, because if there's less of us or if they do these spinoffs, you don't need them either.
Right. What for you is the central demands that you'd like to see get adopted, and what you're hearing from other members is the number one concern or number 1, 2, 3 concern in the midst of these negotiations?
I think that everybody is in agreement that the number one concern is COLA, which is cost of living. We've seen just massive amounts of inflation happen since our last agreement. The last status I read was like inflation was 18%. Our last agreement only gave us a 6% gross wage increase over the lifetime, which means we all took a huge cut to our standard of living. That's extremely hard as even a traditional employee, but then you add on top of that, we have temps and tiers. So they are scraping to get by. 60% of our membership is living paycheck to paycheck, and they're never going to get ahead. And so I think COLA is absolutely the biggest thing that we need to capture in this next set of agreements. After that, it would be a pension and what we call in GM VIBA, but it is post-retirement health insurance.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. And what do you say outside of, those cost of living issues and increases that radicalized people? What were some of the moments that led you all to making these demands and saying enough is enough with management and taking a strong approach under the leadership of Shawn Fain?
Well, I think we've just had nothing but concessionary agreements for about 30 years. And everybody's just fed up with it. They're fed up with it, and it's been hard. And, for me, I went on strike in 2019 for 40 days, and we went on strike for 40 days for a contract that ended up being a concessionary agreement. And that's, that really lit a fuse under everyone, where it was like, we had to fight for that. We had to fight to still lose. So it's just really refreshing to see a whole new leadership come in, and that leadership say, we're with you in this fight, and we understand, you know, that you're frustrated, we're frustrated too, we've been there. A lot of the brand new leaders on the executive board were on the floor 9 months ago. They were working next to us. They were facing the exact same battles we have been. So they know, right? There isn't like these years of kind of getting complacent and falling like out of tune with the floor. They were on the floor with us. And so they're ready to fight too. And it's very exciting. And it's gotten everybody like to a point where it's like, if our leadership is going to back us this much, we can actually win these fights.
What's that like to be able to, you know, a lot of people watching this may not be in a union, to participate in like an electoral process, a democratic process that is so connected to your material well-being?
Oh, I mean, to me, everybody should be in a union. I can't say it enough, right? We all deserve to have a voice at the place where we spend the mass majority of our lives. I know for auto workers, and I'm sure it's the same with all the working class, because really at the end of the day, if you get down to the nitty gritty, all of the working class has the same exact like grievances and the same fight. So everybody should be part of a union. We spend our lives here, and you deserve to have a say in what that looks like for you.
Well, how can people support in this audience the UAW as they approach the master agreement deadline on September 14th?
I mean, the biggest thing that I would tell everybody right now is to just stand in solidarity. Even if you're not an auto worker, stand in solidarity with us. Understand our fight. Listen to us. Do not believe the company propaganda. It is insane, some of these headlines saying that auto workers make $60, $70 an hour. That is just completely not true. So just don't believe the propaganda. Do your research, understand our fight, listen to us when we talk about our fight. If it so happens that we have to go on a strike, we would love everybody to come and stand on a strike line with us. Donate to our pantry so that our members are able to stay out as long as possible. Those are the biggest things that I can say. And then after that, even after we win this fight, because we will win this fight, I'm positive we'll win this fight, be an ethical consumer, and please like put your money where it helps people and it grows the middle class. That's what's going to give our generation and every single generation after us more opportunity. And I just think it's incredibly important to make sure our next generations have opportunity too.
Well, really appreciate your time today, Jessie Kelly of the UAW Local 160. We will be following this, obviously, incredibly closely as these negotiations continue. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, guys. With that, we are going to wrap up the first hour, the free hour of this program. Head into the fun half, take some calls, read some IMs, all that good stuff. Matt, what is happening on Left Reckoning?
Yesterday on Left Reckoning, had a really fun time with the boys at Minion Death Cult. I don't know if you heard of that podcast, but it's very funny.
No.
A podcast, Tony and Alex, they look at right-wing comment sections. They've been doing it for a while, but like basically to like, it's really the modern public square for, you know, really antisocial people.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about that, and also Alex is a Teamster, so we talked about the UPS negotiations, and that's why I was like that last question about the democracy, because we talked about...
That was your question. You could say you IM'd it to me. Yeah.
Because Alex is talking about the UPS, and there's guys who are like, they're taking the right stance, which is like, their position is like, you know, vote no on this just to see if there's more fight, you know, for another bigger ask from the union. But ultimately it's a good contract, or better than, you know, they have been getting. But there are certain people who think it's like Democrat to vote yes on the contract, and said they're going to vote no because Dylan Mulvaney would vote yes. It's very funny the way it's yes. And it's just funny how, like, you know, we have these theories about how the union movement is going to like sort of come into you know, conflict with the sort of pathological partisanship we have in this country, but actually it's a little bit more messy than that. But
totally. How do people even, the idea that anybody knows who Dylan Mulvaney is just like drives me. I mean,
like one guy's gonna vote no on the contract because it has stuff about pronouns. It's like, guys,
yeah,
like
eyes on the prize.
Can you like
please?
vote no for more money from the people? Like you're really gonna sink a contract, and then the thing you're gonna ask for more of is
to own the libs,
to get rid of the pronoun stuff. Like, come on, guys. But anyway,
yes,
yeah, it's very interesting, and also I'm envious of all union members because I think you should vote. I always vote. Mainly because the unions want you to vote for certain candidates. But like to vote like that, like, oh, we need more money.
Right.
Like that's what I'm talking about.
On ESVN today, we are going to be talking probably a little bit of like preseason and
talking the entire show about Anthony Edwards and his emergence as young MJ at the FIFA basketball stuff.
We will not be fully centering our show around that, but if you want to call in, you have we will be taking calls today. I've got to do a little bit more programming for ESPN, so just stay tuned. But we'll be on at 4 p.m. Eastern today.
Just watch the no dribble dunk that Anthony Edwards did and get the copyright strike. It's worth it.
Yeah,
and we'll probably talk about the Women's World Cup final too.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, go woke, go broke.
And we're gonna keep up on that Michael Orr story, which is insane. Okay, the number is 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun. Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Denner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them. Oh. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what? A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sorry about that, everybody. We were calling into the phones, and now the phones are open. It's 646-257-3920. Dago Lefty says, Emma, did you see the supposed group of natives that are petitioning to get the red blank and Indians name reinstated? They call themselves Native Americans Guardians Association, immediate red flag of a group that calls themselves NAGA. I smell a billionaire backer that claims 164th Native ancestry. That does sound like a very good theory for that. I will check that out as well.
Yeah.
Union fan says, shout out to my friend for going public with his unionization efforts with the Teamsters at Corsair Gaming in Georgia.
Oh, hell yeah.
Shout out.
That is awesome.